And welcome to Cosmic Koolaid. I'm your host, Cory Short. This is episode 12, and in the booth with me today, I got my mentor in this broadcast game, Mr. Matt Mittan. Matt, how are you, sir?
I am thrilled to be here and getting some Kool-Aid.
I gotta say, man, I'm a little bit intimidated to have you here. And if you all don't know,
Looking to see who's behind me.
I've been a part of 2 radio shows in my career, and they were both close to 15 to 20 years ago. And both were because of this man here in the booth with me. We did the Weekend Report with Matt and Cory, which was a politically driven,
it was like community news oriented. Yeah,
and that was where I got my feet wet. I didn't really know a lot at the time, and I didn't really have a lot to offer the show. And it ended up bowing out to do a sports show at 1350, which you managed at the time, and had a lot of fun with that. But had to get back to work making money because that. Yeah, it was a little small market station. There was not a lot of advertising potential out there at the time, or at least I didn't have time to commit to it. But anyway, thank you for giving me that experience. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, we've known each other a long time. I've known you since you first dipped your toes into entrepreneurship as a teenager. So going back a few years, and what I saw in you then is the same thing I see in you now, that so many people in our community where you film this know, is that your heart's there for the people that you come in contact with. And when it comes down to broadcasting, I've been doing broadcasting since I was 15. I'm in my 50s now, so I've done this a long time, and being a servant to people around you and having an open heart, have the attitude of a student, but the spirit of a servant. And there's certain people that have that, and you have that. And so, over all these years and everything you've done and all the entrepreneurial things you've done and media stuff, it's very validating to know that who I saw when you were a teenager is exactly who I see today, with more life experience and more wisdom. But, that core, that light inside you is still the same light that I saw those years ago.
Well, I appreciate those words and just being able to maintain your respect all these years. I'm proud of that. So you've definitely seen many incarnations,
many chapters, yeah.
Many
both
valleys.
Both of us, yeah. The highs, the lows, the losses, the triumphs, all of that. That's
Pain,
the journey
divorce.
of life.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So glad to have you here, man.
Yeah,
you really do. You mean a lot to me. You've had a big impact on me, and sure glad to have you here to celebrate this new venture and to talk about all things you got going on as well. So let's dive right in. Let's jump on this first segment. Let's focus on your career in radio. So you said you were 15. Tell me about how that started for you at 15.
All right. So growing up in the Boston area in the 80s, and ESPN on Saturday mornings used to have they had a host that would segue between all their outdoors programming. And I've always grown up in outdoorsman, paddling, fishing, camping, all that kind of stuff. And I'd see these guys getting all this free gear and getting to travel to all these great places to go fishing. And at 14 years old, I was like, I want to do that. I want people to send me free gear. I want to get paid to go fishing. So by the time I was 15, I figured out what I had to do in order to be able to do that. And back then, in that time frame, you had to have an FCC license to be a broadcaster, not just to own a station, but to get on a microphone for TV or radio. You had to have your little thing like a driver's license, but it was an FCC license. So I figured out that I could get that from a community college nearby, but my parents had to sign the paperwork to get me in early, and I took all the required courses, took my test and everything else, and then I just started going around shopping for places that would give me a camera and an editing booth, basically, and just convince them of stuff. And we shot a pilot episode with me and my friends. It was kind of Wayne's World meets Roland Martin fishing show. It was horrible. It was ridiculously ahead of its time. I'll say that. It was TikTok before there was TikTok because it was so stupid. But we had fun.
Can you imagine if we had all these formats?
Oh my gosh.
20, 30 years
I'm
ago?
glad, because I probably wouldn't have had the sustained career if it had been easily accessible my entire history, if people could have searched it.
Either that or you'd be a billionaire right now.
Or I'd be a billionaire, maybe, but it was something where we had the big, the 1/4-inch tapes, not even VHS tapes, but we would run around and we used that to sell to different affiliates. And so at the time, it was before there was cable access or anything like that. And so there were these channels that every community had that they didn't really have anything to put on them. They were doing bulletin board stuff, or they do town hall meetings and things like that. And I was like, there's where we can go. They're not going to pay us, but I can get the visibility out there, and then I can start building a brand where I can get people to send me free fishing gear. And that's really how it started. And so by the time I was 16, we were on the air, and me and my friends had fun doing that until I left for the Air Force. And, I never looked back. Now looking back, it's like, holy smoke. I mean, we had a syndicated TV show as teenagers, and I had sponsors like Shimano and Rapala and stuff like that, and I didn't think anything of it, because for me it was just, I'm just trying to have fun. I just want to get free stuff.
What kind of stuff did you guys talk about?
Oh goodness. Well, there were goofy little segments. We would go fish in different places and talk about what we're doing, but really it ended up being a really great document of me and my friends in our teen years. And it's too bad that the technology isn't there, because the only thing that still exists to this day is the pilot episode, which was transferred onto a VHS just so I'd have it. But we reused the 1/4 inches. You'd have your runner that would run around to the different affiliates, pick up the 1/4 inch tapes from the week before, bring them back to the central studio, dub the new edited episodes on, and run them back out. So you had like a 3/4 inch tape rotation. And, again, we weren't thinking for posterity's sake. We were just a bunch of teenagers having a good time with cameras and microphones and going on location. But my favorite segment, though, is every week on the show, I would walk up next to some random person fishing on a bank somewhere. I'd take one cast as I stand right next to him, catch a fish, and be like, hey, throw it back in and walk away. Now, I had to walk up next to like 8 or 10 people a week in order to catch one situation, where I actually caught a fish. But that was like one of my favorite segments of every show, was walking up next to random people. Of course, you have to get them to sign a release afterwards. But I think a key moment for me in my media story was I was walking toward this one guy, and he was fishing in a spot that I knew really well, and I knew I could catch a fish first cast. I felt really confident about it. I'm like, and I know how to catch a good fish. He's not casting where the fish park here, the bass and everything. And so, got one of my friends, because I trained all my friends for sound and camera work and everything. You can relate to that. You've always had your friends close. And so they're off in the tree line getting the stuff. I've got my little wireless mic on. I'm walking down the bank toward the guy, and he turns around and he's like, oh, hell no, you're not doing that to me. And it was the first time I had ever been recognized as because of a media thing. And there was something in my DNA that went, oh, I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
I like that. And, then after being in the Air Force, just fell right back into media again. So other than my 8 years in the Air Force, I've been doing media since I was 14, 15 years old.
Did Matt and Matt start shortly after the Air Force?
Right afterwards. Okay. Yeah, that was, it was AM Asheville, and then it became the Matt and Matt show. It was AM Asheville with Matt and Matt, but that was I think it was October 1996.
And that was your first professional show.
I don't know if I'd call that a professional show. If you mean that eventually before it all blew up, I made a little bit of money, then yeah, I guess so. But I don't think I would say that I didn't have a professional show until I was able to support my family on radio, which wasn't until, the mid 2000s, when I could sustain, paying the mortgage on a nice house and, doing all the things we want to do talking to a microphone.
It's so funny you say that, because we met in 99, 2000.
Yeah.
I was on the air with you 2001-ish.
Yeah.
And at that time, you were a radio god. And you're saying you really it wasn't even pro until 2005. That's just crazy to me, because you were a radio god back then.
Well, it's funny. Somebody had found they were going through some old boxes in a storage unit and some of the newspaper that they had wrapped stuff in. They pulled it out, and the local daily paper, front page, top fold, was a picture of me in a studio, and it said, longtime radio veteran, Matt Mittan, everything, and it was 1999 or 2000 or something like that. And I was like, whoa, I was young.
Well, and also at the time, you had some other business ventures going on. You were Asheville Tribune.
Well, I was an executive editor for Tribune papers, which at that time was a little bit different than it is now. We had papers in North and South Carolina, weekly papers, and so I was overseeing the executive editorial function for 5 newspapers. And then I left there to start my own newspaper, which was the Valley Record, and published that for, quite a number of years. And so print was really where I made my money, because I was, before the Tribune, I was also a manager for the Asheville Citizen-Times. And I did that job right out of the Air Force. I walked in, Virgil Smith was the publisher at the time, And I got a temp job doing data entry at the Citizen Times. I mean, right fresh out of the military. I didn't know Asheville, where I've lived for nearly 30 years now, but I knew I loved it and I didn't want to go anywhere else. So I needed to find employment so I could pay rent, and I walked in his office and I basically wouldn't let him, I wouldn't leave until he gave me a job. And that was working in management at the Citizen Times and in circulation and stuff. But yeah, so print was, being an editor, a writer, publisher, and all that. Radio was always there, but radio wasn't the breadwinner. It wasn't until, I had what you would, say what people perceived as being successful, having high ratings, the content having great impact and everything. That had to happen for several years consistently before all of a sudden it translated to income.
Yeah.
And then when it started to take off, it really took off. I I ended up shutting down my other businesses. I got out of newsprint and
that's when you had that's when things got real. It was with the 5 p.m. show, the drive time afternoon show.
So 3 to 6. It was 3 to 7 for a while there too, for about a year or so. 4 hours. It was too much, 5 days a week. But so it was when I did a show called Take a Stand, and everything just clicked. Everything clicked, and we had about a 10-year run of being the #1 rated show in the region for like 10 years straight. I mean, beating the big FMs and all that kind of stuff. And that was a really magical time, in a lot of ways, but it also was a very difficult time too. It was, I think the universe balances things out, and the more blessing there is, the more painful roots system there is to it, and vice versa. Things may be painful and struggling on the public side where you're like, oh, it's really sort of, but at home, maybe so happy, things are going great, and I think things just kind of balance out that way. So, it was an amazing ride, but there were a lot of challenges that led to tough life consequences and learning lessons outside of the studio. For me, I look back and I say now, what an amazing ride. And even the tough stuff that happened, I can see now in hindsight how it really cleared the way for a purpose-centered and balanced life that I'm living now, that I couldn't have gotten to if I hadn't gone through the stuff I did.
Sure. Sure, and I can tell you this, somebody that's watched your journey all along, it does seem like you're in a good place, good, peaceful place in life.
Anybody that goes out with their hair like this, they got to be comfortable.
Absolutely. Well, mine only looks like this because I keep gel here in the studio. I came in looking rough myself.
So everybody knows he's had that since he was 18.
Yeah, my hairstyle hadn't changed my whole life since I was like 5, really. But
yeah.
Okay. Well, while we're on the subject of Take a Stand with Matt Mittan, let me take this opportunity to call you out on something, sir.
All right.
Told you it was coming, and so you used to be really well known for your neutral position on things. Over the last year, it seems you might be leaning heavily in a different direction.
Over the last year, I didn't think I was leaning in any directions on anything.
4 years. We'll say 4 years.
Okay.
You seem to have taken more of a liberal approach.
I would say, when I was doing Take a Stand, one of the things that was a trademark of the show is that everybody was welcome at the table. And at one point or another, everybody was pissed off at me. And the way that I approached that, and maybe it was the journalistic side, maybe it was the gaslighter in me, I don't know, maybe a mix of the two. But if I saw that there was one area or one ideal that wasn't getting a seat at the table, I felt like it was good for dialogue to make sure it did. And so if any one opinion or position or idea got a dominant place in a conversation, I would take on the role of inserting as strong an argument as I could in the other direction. And so it led to things where, at times, I'm being celebrated by people that would identify themselves as conservative, and they're inviting me to their events and speak to them. Other times, threatening boycotts against the station, and the same for people that identified as progressive. Are like, oh, he's a terrible person, and at other times they're like,
to you, Don Yelton.
So it's one of those things where I think I've always been motivated to have voices heard against the current. And I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to even take on arguments that I don't always necessarily agree with. And I looked at it as an opportunity to sharpen arguments. It's like,
I
all right,
totally see that.
yeah. So,
and I'm not judging you. I'm not political. You know
yeah.
that. I don't.
No, but
care.
it is funny though, because when I stepped away from doing, because now, and you know this, I mean, I'm running multiple businesses and multiple stations now, so I don't get on air as often. I do a weekly countdown show on our music station, and my partner Michelle and I have an outdoors travel show that we do that runs it has a season, April to October, and then every once in a while I'll talk to a business person that I want to highlight or something like that, or if there's an issue where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of curious about this, and I take a very, very Switzerland approach now, and it's because what had changed, I don't feel like I changed a whole lot, but what changed was the scope of tolerance toward different ideas or dialogue in the marketplace. And so, whereas before I could swim and sway across different issues or ideological camps, and it was okay, you could swim back and forth. That's not so much the case anymore. You swim anywhere over here, all of a sudden, oh, there's that person, he's this, and everything else gets shut off. And I remember the eye-opener for me was there was something that happened here locally in town where we live, and I said something that I didn't think was political. I thought it was just a really good common sense human position to take. And all of a sudden I had people calling advertisers demanding they boycott my station. And I'm like, wait, what? Are you serious? And I was like, I don't need to get out there and do that anymore. When I was doing that, when I was swimming through the different, lanes and antagonizing or validating different people that I may have agreed or disagreed with, it didn't matter. It was about the dialogue. You can't do that anymore, unfortunately, because I think it's important. I think it makes for better solutions and stronger community when there's tolerance, even in frustration or agitation, to in one moment be like, oh, I can't believe I ever told anybody to listen to this guy. Oh, what a creep. Blah, blah. But then a few months later go, actually he's kind of got a good point on this other thing. And I think that's something that's important to society that we've kind of seen a diminished thing.
Do you believe in editing yourself to satisfy your sponsors?
I have definitely decided to exercise different skill sets I have and not exercise skill sets I have, because it's not just me that I'm providing for anymore.
Sure.
There's a lot of people whose platforms and life plans and goals center around things that I'm responsible for. And so in that sense, I don't know that it's editing my content or anything like that so much as it is discerning the greater good. There's not a need for me to get out there and make a point about something.
Right.
I saw somebody posted a meme and they said, I've reached that point in my life where you could tell me 1 + 1 = 4, and I'm going to be like, you're absolutely correct, and then walk on. And I'm more in that position now because I find myself in a role now at this stage of my life where I'm more of, a facilitator, supporter, mentor of other people's goals that I want to associate with. When I look at, like, for Biz Radio, for one of our stations, amazing talent. The hosts, we have like 17 people on the station, and they're out there and they're really fighting for the things they believe in to make society and community and entrepreneurship and everything better. Whether it's in mental health or if it's in investments, into local economy or things like that. And I want to do whatever I can to help them be able to have the impact that they're intended to have. So I'm more in a support role. Whereas before I was the tip of the sword. Now, I'm there, I'm holding the handle on, I'm making sure it's balanced right. I forget what do they call it when you get the right balance on the sword, but I'm more in that position now. And I'm fine with that, So I do get people, I still get people come up to me all the time, recognize me and stuff. And it's funny, with media, I think there's a certain component of where people feel like they own you a little bit, and they feel like they know you enough to, even if they've never met you in person, tell you exactly what they think about what you did or didn't do right. And so I've had people in the grocery store flat out say, man, you totally sold out. You used to be a real crusader out there for stuff, and now you just go fishing and stuff. And I'm like, sorry to disappoint, but they're not wrong. I mean, I used to be a fighter on the front lines, and now I'm more You know, I'm more back in the planning room. I'm in the map room, you know. So I don't think it's calling me out. I mean, it's true that, you know, when I saw that there was a dominant conversation thread in the community, my old muscle memory was to challenge that. Yeah, not so much anymore these days. There's not really room to sustain and exist.
Do you still consider yourself independent politically?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and just because I'm not talking about stuff on the air doesn't mean I'm not still engaged.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that I'm not still calling different places and trying to do things behind the scenes to impact what I think is important. I still do that.
Are you happy Elon bought Twitter?
I don't care.
Fair enough.
You know, I mean, it's like, it's one of those, you know, the thing, you can tell me 1 + 1 is 4. And you're absolutely right. It's a private company now. I think that's good. I think it being a private company is good because in media, whenever something's publicly owned, the audience or the community are not the end game. The investor is the end game. Wall Street's the end game. And that skews the priorities of content. You want to talk about editing content. When you're trying to please shareholders rather than serve the calling and the opportunity that being a broadcaster provides for your community, whether a community be geographical, topical, viewpoint, whatever that community is, you know, it could be around Minecraft, you know, but yeah, I think it going private is a good thing and let people bellyache all they want. It's a private company.
So what point did you switch from traditional airwaves to digital? When did that
About
happen?
2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2.5 years ago.
Tell me about that and what's the form, what is your company now? Where can they find you to hear you today?
So the easiest way to plug into everything that I'm doing today is mattmittan.com, and then all the stuff I'm touching is right there.
Okay.
So mattmittan.com, but bizradio.us is the station. We were on 10,000 watt AM station for years. Originally it was Independent Asheville Radio. Then it kind of evolved to become Biz Radio. And we made the switch during COVID. We had always had an eye, and you know this, always had an eye on the digital. Like, that's where it's going, you know? And so when COVID hit, looking at the analytical data of the digital side of things, not only did the audience diversify and expand immensely, but they weren't just dipping in. Older generations, different device platforms, everything, they weren't just checking stuff out digitally. They were going on digital and staying on digital and migrating to other digital from within it. And so analytically, it was like, it's the right time. And so we made the flip in October of 2020.
Not only that, but you get cold, hard facts to show potential advertisers. You get
that, but even more important to me is the ability to directly engage with the audience.
Yeah.
You know, like on our music station, Buzz Radio Asheville, which is only local artists. It's only local original music of all styles. Artists after artists tell us once they're on Buzz Radio, they see an increase in their sales of downloaded music. They're getting more gigs, and it's because the audience can directly buy from the artist right there on the live stream. And it doesn't. We don't keep any of that. You know, it connects right there. You're listening to it. Like, oh, I love the song. Hit the buy button. Boom, you download it and you make a transaction with the artist right there through the station while you're listening. You can't do that on an FM dial. You just can't do it. You know, so that was a big reason. The analytical data, because I'm very analytical when it comes to that stuff, it showed that it was the right time to make the move. And I didn't want to end up like Blockbuster or the Yellow Pages,
right?
You know, and so getting out in front of it, being an independent, it's an easier ship to steer than if you're a chain of stations across the country.
And that's so true, man. I worry so much for our friends. We both know so many in traditional radio still.
Yeah.
I hope they can find a similar path to the digital world that keeps their dreams afloat, you know, because I feel like the airwaves are just dying.
And we're losing, you know, what lasting voices there were that were really focused to community.
Yeah.
Corporate radio's kind of washed a lot of them out because, again, the stockholders, the margins, the advertising revenue disbursements back to the corporate office and the spreadsheet ledgers. We know great people that had huge audiences, had full advertising support, engaged in the community, that get laid off because of spreadsheet analytics in Texas or New York. Had nothing to do with what they're doing here locally. And then also through attrition of loss. You know, one of the best here in Asheville, Pat Ryan, passed away not too long ago. And what a loss to our community. You know, he was such a voice that was really committed. But behind the scenes, what a lot of people may not know is he owned his own show. You know, he was on a national, a national company's local radio station, but he owned his platform. Yeah. And it was a unique situation. And I think that's what allowed him to sustain that community engagement. Not that people at that radio group aren't trying to do that, but it's just a different measurement of success when you're reporting to shareholders versus if you're tied to your local community.
Yep. All right, folks, on that note, we're going to take our first break, pay some of our sponsors. I got Matt Mittan in the studio with me. I'm Cory Short. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Cosmic Koolaid. I'm Cory Short. This is Matt Mittan. We are talking all things radio career. Let's just finish that up, and we got a few other major life things to talk about with you. But tell me, what advice would you give somebody young coming into thinking about getting into broadcast? At this point, let's not call it radio because that's changing.
No. I would say figure out how to do it yourself. Own your own platform. Looking for that great gig with a big company or getting a show on a big station or anything. I just think that that's a path that's not only not very feasible, I'm telling you right now, it's not sustainable or rewarding for 99.99% of people. And as someone who's been broadcasting since he was a teenager, and I'm in my 50s, it pains me to say that. But instead of it being like a doom gloom kind of thing, I would flip it the other way and say, how awesome is it that technology and audience awareness has gotten to the point where you can have a sustainable,
Cosmic
independent
Koolaid.
Yeah. Here's where we drink some of that Kool-Aid.
It's not monetized yet, but it's going to be before long.
That's okay. Even through what a lot of public would perceive as successful commercial radio presence, I shared with you, it was several years of big ratings, big impact, recognized everywhere I go before I made enough money to have a small little shoebox house.
Right.
You know, and then it got, you know, and I had a lot of success where all of a sudden now I was getting big gigs. I'm doing all this stuff. I got a really great contract. I'm making great money and everything. Yeah. How did that turn out?
UNCA, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I'm doing that now, but it's because it makes sense to do it and it's helpful. But I'm talking about, like, you know, flying to DC for events and filling in, you know, on national shows and then, you know, with the ratings consistently being what they were here. You know, Eddie Fox and I were like the two highest paid people in radio and in, you know, the whole greater area and everything. And for folks that don't know, long time, great guy on Kiss Country. But how did that turn out? I left it. I walked away from it. Why? Because the corporate, you know, milieu was pushing for what I did with that time on the microphone to be different than what I felt was right or important. And so I had to leave it. And I'm not the first one to say it, but for anyone that's looking to get into it, I would tell you, you're going to be much more successful if you have an audience of 20,000 that you keep 100% of the engagement and revenues than if you have an audience of 250,000 and somebody else controls that and their profits are being answered to someone else.
Yeah.
Much better to have that freedom of thought and movement and affiliation, and growth or lack of growth is really on you and what skills you learn and how much you hustle and how you bring on new people and delegate things. It's on you. and some people aren't programmed to operate in that way, and that's fine. But somebody that's looking to get into media today, into, whatever format that is, I'd say take the time to, learn how to do it yourself. Maintain your independence and build your own brand and platform. Own it.
Freedom, man. It's a beautiful thing.
That's right. Yeah. What is a ship really, as Captain Jack said? It's freedom, and that's what this is. Media is a ship. You want to be the pirate of days gone old. You say I was born in the wrong century. Vlogging, blogging, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Those are the ships of pirates today. Go out there and explore and experiment and, every once in a while find your bounty. It's not like you get a steady check. It comes in waves. I'm telling you right now, as an independent media person, you're going to go through seasonal waves. You're going to go through periods of great, robust inlays, of money. And then other times where you're like, ramen noodles on the menu tonight, boys, and that you just have to accept that if you're going to do that, understand that you are an entrepreneur as well. Because I think a lot of creative people, they don't think of themselves that way. But if you're going to get into doing your own platform, allow yourself the title of entrepreneur and then seek out the information that ties to that.
And treat it as such.
Yes.
Treat it as such. Give it a good logo. Give it some time.
Yeah.
Give it the elbow
Take
grease.
classes.
Right.
There's lots of resources available for free to go to classes and seminars and even coaching services on the business side of things. But so many creative people, and I don't mean just broadcast, I mean musicians, comedians, anyone that's in the creative force community. They're entrepreneurs. If they want to keep doing it, then they've got to have a little bit of an entrepreneurial attitude toward it. And I think carving out a little space to allow yourself to label yourself something that you may not intuitively think of yourself as will give you a better chance of a sustained presence that can evolve over time. Mine certainly has. Mine's evolved, but I'm still doing what I started doing when I was 15. And I'm very grateful for that. It's changed a lot. But ultimately, what am I doing? I'm doing what I want, the way I want, with the people I want. That's what I did when I was 15. That's what I'm doing when I'm 52.
Man, there was this TikToker, this dude that gets on there and dresses in a Grinch costume and just walks into the frame of the camera with a vacuum cleaner, dancing in I heard he made $4.7 million last year. He just goes into different department stores in different situations in his Grinch costume with a vacuum cleaner and dances a little bit.
Yeah, and
$4.7 million.
That's hard to deal with sometimes. As someone that, put a lot of, I started off doing the stupid bit stuff,
right.
But over time, and I think because of contact with people that are really struggling with things and how policies or economics really impact people's real lives, it kind of matured me and forced me to take a more journalistic approach to stuff I was doing for a number of years there. And so when you see somebody building cardboard forts in a mansion living room, having Nerf gun fights, making millions of dollars, that can make you a little twitchy. You know what I'm saying? When you've worked hard and you've invested, you've learned and everything, and you're doing, impactful kind of stuff. But then I realized, I grew past that, and I was like, no, that stuff, that Grinch dancing with the vacuum cleaner, everything, that's impactful because life's gotten really crazy and really scary and insecure, and it gives people a laughter break. That's important. That's really important, and so if I'm watching, dogs and cats cuddling together and I go down a rabbit hole for a half an hour watching videos of that, I needed that. My psyche needed that. So I don't take that, that kind of like, I don't know what the word would be, almost like an elitist attitude about content. No, because everybody's going through something, and whatever helps somebody get through a day, that's important. That's important. That's impactful.
And how many times have you ever found yourself watching videos that in that moment, nobody else in the world is watching this right now? Only me. I'm the only one thinking of this bizarre shit in this moment. You know what I mean?
But there's so many people in the world today that's not the case anymore. I mean, look at Cocaine Bear. I mean, Come on, it's like huge.
Great example.
Great example. And and people might go, oh God, but it's a break that people need because everything is right in your face. And from that news standpoint, we were talking in the last segment of me realizing that you can't wade back and forth on serious issues because whether it's the size of the population or the change in technology, there are so many radicalized, outspoken, non-empathy based people across spectrums of politics that have saturated different landscapes that you can't get into normal conversations with stuff without having the seagulls like from Nemo getting all over you. Mine, and the noise crowds everything out. So what does that mean? That means the media outlets that are supposed to cover the things that are going on in our lives get overrun with the mine. And it's so stressful and it's so discouraging that Cocaine Bear sounds like a really nice break for a couple hours. You know what I mean? Or going through, Bushman videos for an hour, jumping out at people, hearing the same scream for 2 hours going, I needed that. I get it.
All right. Give me your favorite moment. We're gonna wrap up the radio talk. Give me your favorite moment from your career in radio.
That's a lot of years to dig through my brain.
You got to sit because of your career. You got to sit and have breakfast with Billy Graham. Anything you can think of.
Actually, the first thing that popped in my mind, and it was a simultaneous flash of a few different things, but one theme in all of it, and that is where I was able to serve as a conduit of information to a really impactful, emotional, event-based thing that happened. I'll give you an example. Got a call from a police force member in Brevard one time. Said, hey, I got a call from a mom. This was during the Gulf War, the second Gulf War. And said, got a call from a mom. Her son just died in Iraq. He's being flown back to Asheville Regional Airport. There's no one there to greet his body arriving and with the casket and things like that. And so she called to see if we might have a couple officers that could come. And he said, we're short-staffed. We're going to, I'll go there personally, but I'm calling you because I know you know a lot of different people. Are there a few people that you might be able to get? This happened at like 1 p.m. I went on the air at 3. I opened up the show, sharing it. The plane was arriving at 4. And I went on the air and we started talking about it and everything. And being a Gulf War I vet, I've got a personal connection to to what it means to lose somebody in your unit. We lost 2 people in mine. And so it's a thing where I got on the air and I started talking about it, encouraging people. By the time that plane landed from Asheville Airport all the way to Brevard, people lined the road going through Mills River and everything else. And this is before social media and things, and people were lining the street and had flags. And I used to do this thing where I used to say, I'm deputizing the listeners to be reporters. And they'd call in and they'd give a report of what was going on and talk about it and everything. And there was a procession of vehicles from bikers to first responders to just, people. And the procession was 3 miles long.
Wow.
The turnout of that, guess what? There were liberals, there were conservatives, there were independents, there were Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, unaffiliateds. There were rich, poor, black, white. Those kind of things happening are what's most special to me. I remember a blizzard hitting that wasn't forecast and people being stuck on the highways in their cars, couldn't get out. And I stayed on the air through the whole night and we played like card games and we were doing Trivial Pursuit over the air just to keep people and keep them updated, saying, here's what's happening. Teams are moving through here. And then we had some people that were going out with like food and the hot pack things that you could break, and then, during the floods in 2004, I stayed on the air for almost 3 weeks straight. I was sleeping on the floor and us and the rest of the crew there, we were the only means of communication for the region. Because we were out at Radio Ranch where we had generator backups and we had staff on site. The engineers had a bunker apartment down below the building, Yeah. And we were able to stay on the air and we were it. We were it for not only emergency responders and government officials to get word out, but also for the community to get word in. And they set up like a war room right there at Radio Ranch because we were the communication bridge. And so I would say looking back through, and there's a lot of moments like that, But that vibe where I had the opportunity to be in the chair on a mic at an important, real, authentic moment of need in our community. Those are the moments that really, I say, that's why I'm here. Those were the things that I needed to be there at that moment and be able to do that.
Fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. That's good stuff. So, but a great segue there. You mentioned in your Air Force stuff. Let's talk about that for a minute. Tell me about that journey and how it got started. What pulled you in and made you decide to go serve this country? Tell me the story.
Well, multiple factors, and I think decades go by, and maybe you wax, a little, poetic on what motivations might have been. Part of it was probably I just wanted to get the hell out of my parents' house, and it seemed like a path to do that, to get out and see the world a little bit. But also, when I enlisted in 1987. I was still in high school. I pre-enlisted, had my parents once again, had to sign the paperwork and everything. And part of it at that time in America, there was a lot of dark outlook about the future of our democracy. Sound familiar? And I know history and today's politics paint different historical figures one way or another based on current politics or societal awareness things. But Reagan had a big impact on me and really made me believe that it was my duty to serve my country and to be proud of that. And being an impressionable teenager and seeing a national figure speak so proudly and stand up to the communists the way, tear down this wall and all those kind of things resonated, because I had in my family, not directly, my dad wasn't in the military, but I had uncles and my grandparents and everything that all served, Vietnam, Korea, World War II. And so there was already, that heritage of service was there. And then combine that with, I want to get out and see the world. I don't want to just be hanging out at the same bridge over the river in my neighborhood, that my friends, I saw guys that were 10 years ahead of me and still hanging out at the same spot and, talking about the same things that me and my friends were. I didn't want that for my future. I wanted to see more. I knew there was more out there in the world to see. And I got to do that, for 8 years. And I, traveled all around the world and got to experience different cultures and different scenarios, different threats, different, mentors from very different lives and different areas that were able to, give me perspectives on it. I'll give you an example. Like I was stationed in Texas. I was in Wichita Falls, and my roommate was from Dallas. And, growing up in the family that I did, which was a multiracial family, very heavy with adoption, a lot of adoptions in my family, and people from all around the world adopted, different colors, different, ethnicities, things like that. So for me, race wasn't a topic.
Right.
And while in Texas with my roommate, Darcel, and then going back to be with his family in West Dallas, Fort Worth, was an eye-opener for me about race, and it changed my whole outlook. The biggest impact on me was, oh, crap, this young little Boston guy doesn't know crap,
Right.
And the pain and the lasting impact of different societal ills were very real. They were very tangible in real people's lives, my age, right here and now. That was an eye-opener for me. And so being in the military for 8 years gave me several opportunities to have a broader awareness of things because of exposure to them and traveling the world. I got to England and I was like, I lived in England for 2 years and I thought, oh, it's just like the United States. No, not like the United States, not in the area I was. I got there and I was like, they still got straw roofs on the houses. I was like, what? I was like in the area that I was stationed at back there in the late 80s. I was blown away. You get into London, and sure, it's, there was even an American section of town. You go to big cities in the United States, you'll have like Chinatown and Little Italy. Well, you have Piccadilly Circus in London, which is the American section of town. So it was an interesting experience to go to a place I thought was just like America, but that the fact that their city, just like the city I'm from, has different, ethnic sections of the city. There was an ethnic American section of the city, which was, that's kind of okay. America is kind of full of itself a little bit. We think the world is us, and it's not. And so I'm grateful for the experiences I got over those 8 years.
Well, tell me about the time overseas.
So, like I said, I lived in England for 2 years. Yep. The Gulf War happened while I was there. And so while a lot of people were deploying forward, we were operating there and bouncing back and forth. Like I was with the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing. So we had, from our base of operation at RAF Lakenheath, we had our operations there. We had what's called the Third Echelon Hospital, which was a tent hospital, and people were air evacing in. Because that's another thing, too, that I realized. The world is not as big as it may seem when you're just staying in your little American pocket. We had flights, B-52 bombers were leaving from Alconbury, just north of our base, doing bomb runs, and we'd count them coming back to make sure they all made it. It's real world. People were getting to us as they're just coming conscious from hitting a landmine. So it's like the theater of war is a lot different real time than what people may think it is, and so like if you're talking about current events in Ukraine, and it seems so far away, and then you hear talks about Germany being hesitant about fighting. You don't realize you can hop on a train at lunchtime and be in Kiev, for dinner.
Right.
I mean, we're not. This is like crazy close proximity of a lot of different cultures and languages and countries, and so being overseas during that, and we had people that were going back and forth in theater. We had satellite facilities in Riyadh, Bahrain, Incirlik, Turkey. All that kind of stuff. So we bounced all around, so there might be a time where I'm in one place and my roommate is in a totally different country, because I was a medic, but I was a specialized medic. And so we did bounce around a lot during that time.
So how much would you say your time there contributed to your stances today politically? How much of the military time shaped that?
Actually, I'd say it wasn't so much the military service, but something that happened while I was in the military station over there had a huge impact, and that was the Battle of Trafalgar. It wasn't military, it was civilian. And if people Google Battle of Trafalgar in London, I was there for it. I was right in the center of it accidentally, and it's where England had imposed what's called a poll tax, that when you turn 18, you have to pay this tax to the government so that you can go vote at the polls. It was the poll tax, and there was such a groundswell of opposition to it. My best friend growing up, Jay, had come over to visit, and we just went into London to go around and visit. We went to Trafalgar. That's where you have the big fountains with the lions and everything. You see them in movies all the time, all the stonework. Beautiful part of London. And we're just hanging out in Trafalgar Square. All of a sudden, we noticed what looks like huge ant colonies of tens of thousands of people coming in. Trafalgar Square has roads that intersect coming in from all different areas. Think of Dysfunction Junction if there was a big stone fountain and an obelisk thing in the center of it, okay? And it's just the streets were filled with people marching toward this epicenter that we're in. And we're like, oh, wow, what's going on? I wasn't following the news in England. I was U.S. military. I didn't know what the domestic stuff was. And so it was a protest to this thing. They all had their signs and everything. We're hanging out. We're like, oh, that's kind of cool, And then it went sideways, and it got violent, and riots broke out, and the police sent in cavalry. They were mowing people down with horses, and people are getting beaten. Then also stuff blowing up. Things are burning, buildings, cars, and everything. And me and Jay just got into one of those big fountains and crawled up in the center of the fountain, holding the center part of it, thinking we're going to die.
Wow.
And to see people fight so fiercely and be willing to endure what they did to oppose being taxed in order to be to vote, all of a sudden made all the things about growing up in Boston, hearing about the Tea Party and hearing about Paul Revere and all this, it all changed because I was right there and I'm seeing people with blood running down their face. I'm breathing the smoke from the burning cars, and that had a huge impact on me, on people's willingness to fight for freedom and self-determination and representative government. And that had a lasting impact on me. Some of the crusade type things that people would associate with my time especially during Take a Stand, where we led caravans to the state capitol, and where just we had as a community, we had a lot of injustices happening to us in the wake of those floods. Of people not dispersing money that we had prepaid into emergency reserve accounts and everything on the state. They weren't dispersing the emergency relief money here to rebuild bridges and economic stuff for businesses. They just weren't releasing it. And nobody was really addressing it. And our elected legislators were just going along to get along. Like, well, we're trying to bring something. I'm like, screw that. People are hurting. Yeah. People are losing their livelihoods. And our infrastructure is decimated here in Western North Carolina. We had, 13 people died in landslides. And so because no one else was doing it, I took up that mantle and I ran with that, and then through that realized the reason they weren't releasing the money from the emergency funds is because there were corrupt little accounts set up by key leaders that were passing bags of cash in bathrooms in restaurants in Raleigh and all that. And we helped to expose all that corruption. And so I think that's where I got painted a little bit as a political activist. Whereas for me, I was just like, no, you got to freaking pay my neighbors the stuff we prepaid for this exact situation. It was never that I was going after politics. Is I was trying to make sure that the right thing was done by my neighbors.
Sure.
And so I don't know that I would have been as militantly resolved in those fights and fighting that corruption if I had not gone through the Battle of Trafalgar in London.
Did they ever make any movies about that battle?
There's a documentary on YouTube about it.
I'd love to check that out.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, it's pretty wild, especially when you see cavalry mowing down people. It's like, this was, this is modern history. This isn't like back in 1860,
So in the Air Force, how did you end up taking the medic route as opposed to landing in, I don't know, Top Gun school?
Yeah. Actually, when I enlisted, I said earlier I was always involved in the outdoors and everything, and I was pretty good marksman shot, and I used to shoot in like turkey shoots, which are marksman competitions and everything. And so when I enlisted, I actually enlisted with a guaranteed job in combat arms. I was like, oh, that's cool. I get to work with guns, I'm good at it, and I break down my own guns, and reassemble them, and maybe or maybe not isolate some different pin alterations to go fully auto on an old 60A Marlin. Anyway, and then when I got to basic training and they do the different testing things, they pulled me aside and they're like, yeah, you got a guaranteed job in combat arms. However, they're like, we really, really think you should consider either going into public affairs or medicine. I'm like, public affairs? Bleh. I was like, oh, there's no way. And in medicine, I was like, I actually kind of like that. There's a lot of nurses and everything. My mom's a nurse, my aunt's a nurse, a lot of medical people in my family, medical service people. And so I was like, yeah, I could do that. That actually sounds really, and I loved it. When I worked in medicine, I loved it. And as a matter of fact, I planned on doing it the rest of my life. I was going to be happy to be like a Little House on the Prairie family practitioner, pay me with eggs, which I said that before eggs were so valuable, and I was going to be happy to do that. I just wanted to be in a community and serving, helping people. And so that was really attractive to me. And when I got out of the service, I had every intention to continue with that and finish out pre-med and do all that. And I had to wait a year for my residency to kick in North Carolina until I could get the in-state tuition for my GI Bill. And in that year, I was like, I really liked when I did my TV show, and they did say maybe I should do public affairs. And so I was doing the temp job at the Citizen Times, and I was like, yeah, I'll do this for a year. I'm going to do medicine the rest of my life. I'll do media for a year just to do this, public communications thing. And the publisher was doing a radio show at the time, a weekly radio show on a local station, and I just hung out. And then when I moved to the Tribune, same thing. The publisher and the editor were doing a weekly radio show, and I was hanging out, and I got a little bit chirpy. And then, somebody was like, you ever thought about doing radio? I thought they meant sell ads. I didn't think about doing it on air. And they said, be here Monday morning at 4:30. I wasn't too long out of the military. It didn't faze me. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I'm working newspaper during the day. I'll come here in the morning. I need extra income, whatever. I was young. I'll do whatever. And that was 27 years ago. I never got back into medicine, but in a weird way, what I had hoped to achieve, where I could be that Little House on the Prairie kind of doctor, pay me with eggs, that's kind of the existence I've carved out. for 27 years. I've been able to help my community in different ways. There's times, I've made good money, but most of the time it's been, I just get by.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that because I'm doing something I love and it has impact and it touches people's lives. So
massive impact.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm good. If my ticket gets punched tomorrow, know that, I can go upstairs going, that was a good run.
So how long did you serve? 4 years?
8 years.
8 years.
Yep.
And your son Aaron followed in your footsteps?
Yep. 9 years Army.
Okay.
He was with the Corps of Engineers. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Would you encourage the youth of today to enlist?
Whether it's enlistment or if it's in like the Peace Corps or anything, I think there's a lot of value to coming out of what our education system structure is and doing something that's part of a larger service calling for a little bit out of high school. Even before you go to college, if you're going to go to college. I think having at least a couple years where you go out, maybe it's a mission trip or maybe it's, the Peace Corps or maybe it's the military or, something like that. I think there's a lot of value. I talked about being exposed to different people and different cultures and different experiences that I still carry with me today. I think it's good. I would encourage people, if not military, some lane of service, even if it's volunteering for a nonprofit for a year or two, and then work a side job to pay your bills, which in Asheville, 4 jobs to pay your bills,
Yeah.
But yeah, I would encourage some kind of service early on before you have life responsibilities, marriage and kids and mortgage and all that kind of stuff. Get out there and serve a greater purpose for a little while. Get that experience and that exposure.
All right. Well, thank you for your service to our
Thank
country,
you.
sir. That was something I never achieved, and I'm thankful to you for yours and to Aaron as well. We're going to take another short break. We're going to come back and talk about parenthood, grandparenthood, outdoors, and a lot of other fun stuff with Matt Mittan. I'm Cory Short. We'll be right back.
In 2023, lines will be crossed, champions will be determined, and legends will be made. HVW once again sets the stage for great professional wrestling in Western North Carolina, bringing the best talent together for the Showdown Series at Silverados. Featuring TJ Boss, Jada, Stone, Reno, Royce, Luca, Daniels, Marcus, Erics, Michael, King, and King Enterprise. The bar and standard in professional wrestling has always been high in North Carolina. This year, High Velocity Wrestling takes that into the atmosphere. It's the Showdown Series at Silverados.
And welcome back to Cosmic Koolaid. I'm Cory Short, Matt Mittan in the booth with me. Matt is a legendary radio personality around these parts. Just a great friend, great guy, great entrepreneur. He is currently the owner of, what is it called?
BizRadio.us and also BuzzRadioAsheville.com are the 2 radio stations that we own. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I co-own Buzz Radio Asheville with Michelle Sheaf, my partner, and Biz Radio is mine.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, let's just one final question on the last subject before we dive into your personal life. Do you fear that Putin is going to end it all and turn the lights out on the entire populace?
Yeah, this is going to sound, I don't know how it's going to sound. I don't worry about any of that stuff anymore. I figure the world's going to end when the world's going to end, and someone's going to cause it. If it's somebody here in the United States or somebody in Uganda or somebody in Russia, I don't really have control over that, and I think as more years have gone by, I'm less interested in investing my brain cells, my energy, or most valuably, my time to things that I don't really have control over, and I think that, we've talked a lot about media today. I think a lot of media is reactionary in the style of coverage they do instead of proactive. Like, here's some things going on that still have not been decided yet. Here are some things that are being discussed. Here are the avenues for you to have input. You just don't see that in media coverage anymore. It's like, oh, yesterday this happened, and oh, this is how horrible this is. And that's it. And that's just, I guess that's why they call them media consumers instead of, engaged citizens. It's a very different thing. So as far as, who's going to lead to what ruin or this or that, I think there's players all around the globe that have sinister intentions, whether there may be some here in the United States or somewhere else, people that internalize their goals and ambitions for power and influence exist throughout the human race. And I think that there's always a struggle of people that want to seek the power and control and influence, and those that want to live and let live and are willing to try to fight to protect other people's ability to live and let live. And I think that's the two categories of humanity that exist. Put aside race, national origin, religion, or anything. I think the human race comes down to two different components. Those that want to, create or restore, then nurture and protect, and those that seek to consume and expand power and control and influence. And unfortunately, the people in the camp that just want to create or restore and then nurture and protect, they oftentimes instinctually are not going after the ones that are trying to do the opposite. Whereas the people that are doing the opposite seek to suffocate those that are operating independently and free. And so when you have a view like that, like I do, is Putin a threat to world stability? Absolutely. Is Trudeau in Canada a threat if all of a sudden he gets ambition? Yeah, he would. Maybe they poison the syrup. I don't know, but but I think that the best way to combat that evil, if you want to call it that exists within, part of humanity, is to try and put our energies into taking care of our own, first and foremost. Be a steward for your own garden, your family, your business, your community, and then look to nurture, support, and validate the others that are trying to do the same. And if we that are trying to do those things focus our energies to that, I think it creates an unconquerable mass for the ones that have evil intent. So that when they do run up against a wall, like you saw with Nazi Germany, they hit a wall of opposition that they can't overcome. And I think that's been the struggle since Cain and Abel.
Do you feel like North Korea is a legitimate threat?
Like I said, I think anybody's a legitimate threat. I mean, we've seen how somebody driving a car into a crowd can shut down an entire area. We've seen how
a white balloon can fly all the way over the country and not get shot down,
and how reporting on the other things that were shot down can disappear like that never happened, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, but what about that halftime performance?" I mean, so again, it's not that I don't care about things; it's that I care deeply about the things I can have impact on. Yeah. And so when you get to a point of discernment where you don't invest your energy into trying to dialogue with the undialogable, it makes for a little bit calmer, more peaceful existence. And going back to that meme thing, if getting to the point if somebody comes to you and is absolutely dead set, the earth is flat. All right, cool. Are you going to the edge of that world? No, either am I. So who cares? So it's just, now if somebody comes to me and go, there's a real issue with homelessness here in our community. And, if it's because of mental health, if it's because of drugs, if it's because of the economics, let's talk about how we as a community can try to address it. And if people say, oh, well, people choose to be, okay, we still have people. We have businesses in our downtown district that are being broken into. We have people that are, having attacks against them. And we have people that are suffering, sleeping under bridges and out in the woods. Sure. That's real. I can see it with my eyes. What do we do about that?
Right.
Those are the kind of things I would rather dialogue on, whether it's on a microphone or privately. Sure. Those are the things I spend my time on.
It's a serious issue.
It is.
It really is. And I can't even begin to concoct a solution.
No, but you can.
It's above my pay grade.
Right. But you can have conversations with people that you come in contact with of what do you see? Here's what I see. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do about it either. There's strength in that. There's strength in the acknowledgement and kind of manifesting into the universe that here's an issue. And all of a sudden, if 2 or 3 or 4 people that are independently, entrepreneurs or media people and everything, talk with each other and acknowledge, yeah, this is something here, I think that sends the signal in the universe that can manifest an idea or manifest something next in a conversation.
I'm at the Shell station across the street from the golf course on Swananoa River Road there this past week, and it's just really sad to see the Swananoa River, or French Broad River. Is that the French Broad?
That's the Swananoa River.
Swananoa River.
Yeah. It's become its own community. Yeah.
It's so sad. It felt like you remember the movie Cyborg with Van Damme?
No, I don't remember it.
Anyway, it's like this group of like apocalyptic, like they're wearing whatever they can find and just terrorizing that strip of Asheville.
Yeah. Well, and I say it's become a community because when people are driving around and you're getting from point A to point B in your existence and you have your goals and you have your things, you may not be looking in your peripheral just beyond the tree line and see that there are entire encampments. There's people that are stacked up on pallets in drainage pipes through the winter. And just driving through parts of our town, if you take the moment to look beyond what your normal routine is, you can see it's there. And, you talk about, the cyborg kind of thing. There's some drug stuff that, I had a business downtown for a number of years and I engaged with, people that were on the streets and everything. There's something very different going on right now. There is something drug-wise that is turning people into zombies. I mean, the body movements and the yelling and the almost like the face melting right off their skin, off their bones. Yeah. There's something very different going on. And so having a conversation about what does that mean? Do you just lock everybody up? Do you do, code purple low bar shelters? These are things people are talking about. But going back to early in the conversation where, there's been such a saturation of extreme tribalism around issues that when certain keywords come up, people all of a sudden label like, oh, that's a fill in the blank issue.
I'm guilty of that. I'm very guilty of that.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
And when you're oversaturated with so much stimuli that is measured that way, you can't help but assimilate to that. And so it's hard to break away from that. And so long as we can't have the conversations to hear what that person thinks and then have the expectation that they're also going to hear what we think and why, if the conversations don't happen, you're never going to find a way to a solution that's a manageable, sustainable thing. And so is Putin the existential threat to our democracy and to world stability? Or in our world, right here in our community, is our inability to talk about the homelessness and the drug issues, is that the detriment to our world and our sustainability? Which is more of the existential threat? Businesses in downtown all shutting down because no one will go downtown anymore? That seems more like a realistic threat to the life that we live in the world that we're existing in our kids than, what Putin says about nukes. And it's not that it's not important, but, you use the phrase above my pay grade. There are people in a higher pay grade that are supposed to be dealing with that. Whether they do it right or if they do it at all, I don't really have control over that. But I do have control that I can try to support and have sincere, vulnerable, honest conversations about things that are happening right here in my community.
Have you been paying attention much to the job of Chief David Zach?
I have.
How do you feel about it?
I feel like he's in an impossible situation.
Yeah.
And like I was talking about before, when all of a sudden something gets said and there's such a saturation, people instantly throw that tribalism defense wall up and attack. And I think that there's things I don't think it's just a two-sided issue when it comes to Chief Zach. I think it's actually like a 3-4-sided issue, And so I think he's in an impossible situation when it comes to dealing with different things. And, I was talking about earlier that, there was something I talked about on the air and I thought it was a pretty straightforward thing. And all of a sudden it led to people calling advertisers and trying to boycott the station. It was a piece of feedback about Chief Zach that I gave on the air.
Yeah.
And I said, there was a vote about bulletproof vests on city council for funding for that. One person on city council voted against it. Everybody else voted for it. And he put out a statement. He made a statement identifying the one person that voted against it by name and suggesting that that probably wasn't a smart vote, since police have to come and protect her if something goes sideways.
Yeah.
And in today's climate, I felt like there might have been a better way to, to address that, because the tribalism, all of a sudden people are like, oh, he's threatening a city councilwoman, all this stuff. No, he's not. He was voicing frustration on how in the world do you not vote to protect cops with bulletproof vests?
Right.
Have you not followed the news on how much murders and shootings and everything going on, the impossible situations our police are in? And I think you know about this with me. I've been a longtime supporter of the police. I've done ride-alongs. I've done, different community things with them and everything. And so I said, I think focusing on the rest of council and saying, I'm glad that they support it. For people that may have been opposed to it, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of, talk to them and, but to, instead of acknowledge the success in a time where there was a lot of pressure to defund the police, that they voted in support of this request, except for one, to focus on the one, I think just kind of, it created that environment and everything. So I just suggested that, maybe there's a little bit different way to address it. And then all of a sudden you're anti-police and advertisers, dropping and, and being labeled things. And it was like, and from people that knew me too, it's like, wait, I'm not that, but that, when things like that happen, it goes the other way too. There's things that the police address legitimately. Why is the DA not following through on cases? I mean, when you look at the data of the things that police are having to do, and then people say, oh, well, they said they're not going to respond to calls of under this. Well, why do you think it's getting worse? Well, why would they continue to respond to things when overwhelmingly, over and over again, the DA doesn't convict?
Right.
They're operating in a triage mode. So, yeah, it's an impossible situation. And unfortunately, I think the climate and the environment of platforms of dialogue are so defensively structured, audience-wise and host-wise, that when there's an honest and sincere attempt to have a reasonable dialogue, it falls into the encampment stuff. And so conversations don't occur. And people have already set their camp that they're for this or they're against that person or anything. And I don't know how to bridge that. I don't know how to bridge that, because when I tried, the livelihood and the success of the platform that I'm trying to make positive impact, and all the people that are reliant on that, was under assault.
Sure. Well, this isn't about right or left. What do you think it is that Todd Williams stands to benefit from letting all these people walk free? What does it do for his career to be so loose with convictions?
Asheville has always had, even before the new Asheville, which I would say like 2012 on, there's always been this thing of where Asheville tried to present an ideal that was a little bit utopian, and I think sometimes doesn't really deal with the reality of things. And let's see, how do I be more specific about that? I can remember way back when, and I think this was probably mid-2000s, and there was a city councilwoman it was Mayor Bellamy. It was then Mayor Terry Bellamy that had to pre-qualify and have a whole disclaimer ahead of speaking out against public defecation on the sidewalks in downtown. She had to give this whole expose on like trying to minimize, how hard it's going to be to hear to say people shouldn't be crapping in front of business entrances. And she, so for regular people that are just going about their daily lives, it's like, you don't have to spend 10 minutes apologizing ahead of saying people shouldn't be crapping at the entrances of businesses on the sidewalk. You know what I mean? So Asheville's always had that. You even go back, you read back on things in like the Great Depression during the 1930s, and some of the kumbaya kind of, advertising that Asheville put out to attract rich people to come here and hang out at the Grove Park Inn and everything. And you had national visible people that were there and were drunk and abusive and all this kind of stuff. So there's always been a hypocrisy in Asheville's PR of who they want to be. and somehow not deal with who we are. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so I think that is still a factor today. And so talking about solutions, I think that moving to district elections for city council would help address some balance to that accountability and allow for a little bit more robust dialogue about different ideas or concerns.
So how is the council formed now? Just
It's at large.
Just the top.
It's at
large,
and it's nonpartisan, which I think it should stay that way. I don't think that partisan politics is a solution for anything. There have been attempts in the past to move Asheville city elections to being partisan elections, where it's Democrats and Republicans and anybody else. You got to go through this whole extra process for voting, and I think that is a detriment to things. I think on the other side, I think we should be moving more elections to nonpartisan, where you have, all right, there's 10 people running for this seat. There's no letters next to their name, just here's 10 people. Vote for the one you think is best. And then there's a runoff of the top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And
Partisanship needs to go away for humanity, period.
And guess what? That's been said right since George Washington's farewell address. So these are not new problems. It goes back to what I said before. I think there's basically 2 camps of humanity's existence. There's those who, live and let live, take care of your own garden, your own family, your own business, and then your community. And those who are always seeking something else, control, power, influence over how things happen. And the thing is you can find areas where, talking about partisanship, there are Republicans that fall into we want to make sure that people do this way. And there's Democrats that other categories, but under that same vein of we want to make sure people do things that way. And then there are Democrats and Republicans that are like, live and let live, man. But they do it in different parts of life. And so for me, why would I want to dip myself and immerse myself into a dialogue that's futile?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so when talking about stuff here locally, whether it's the DA or the chief, I have found it to be more productive to talk to the nonprofits. I have found it more productive to talk to business owners about, well, what do we do right here and now? What can we do? I'm not waiting on someone in an elected office or a hired government position to solve the problem we have in our neighborhood or on a block of downtown businesses. And I think you're starting to see some Asheville businesses coming together and saying, okay, do we need to hire our own private security folks that patrol our block, or something like that? And people get all upset or like, oh, you're talking about vigilantism and everything. No, you're talking about taking care of your garden. And if there's not, if we, the people, are not able to rely on a fire department to take care of, I know you had a house fire, what it's like to go through that, If we don't have a fire department, are you just going to say, oh, well, there's no fire department anymore, I guess I won't take any precautions? If there's no fire department, you're going to take some precautions. You're going to have fire extinguishers. You're going to be a little bit more careful about cleaning the flue maybe or something. Well, that's the same in anything. If government's not doing a good job of protecting the downtown businesses, then the downtown businesses need to have a conversation about how they can operate and how they can sustain their, take care of their garden. And so why is the DA not convicting people? Who knows? Who knows? I don't have a crystal ball into the heart, mind, or spirit of anyone. But I know that a lot of people are getting sent and they're put right back on the street. I know that with the chief, I don't know what's in his heart. I don't know what's going on in his spirit or anything. But I know that police are not able to respond to a bunch of calls that have existentially expanded over the last couple of years. So that's what I know. That's what I see. Now, how do we solve it and what's contributing to it? Let's talk about it.
I felt that for the first time in my life here in Asheville the other day. I rear-ended somebody. It was a little Mexican couple. They didn't speak good English. And I tried to tell them, there's no damage to your car. I can give you cash. I can give you my phone number if she's got medical bills, and they're like, no. She pointed to her back. I was like, okay, we'll wait. And then we're waiting. And I call a friend that I have on the police force and I say, man, I've been waiting here for like an hour. Do you know where the cops are? He said, man, it'll probably be 3-4 hours till somebody's there.
If somebody comes.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So I went back to the couple and I was like, listen, You can come take a picture of my tag, take a picture of my license, take a picture of me. Here's my number, but they're not coming. I just called the police. They're not coming.
Right.
They don't have enough police.
Right.
That's what I tried to explain to them. And we ended up going away. And they never ended up calling.
Yeah.
They never ended up calling. She was fine. Everything's fine. Thank goodness. But
well, see, because one of the things that one of the realities, and it's not just Asheville, by the way. This is happening in communities all across the country. And there's a lot of factors to it, on retention and recruiting of police. The pay is an issue, but also there's a lot of media that has painted the entire police force as the bad apples, and that's picked up a lot of fervor. And so, it's doing something where you're called to serve as a first responder is a thing of dignity and of self-sacrifice and a service to others. And if there's not a system in place to truly hold accountable the ones that are violating that trust, and if there's not public confidence in that, then it ends up painting the entire force, which then contributes to short staffing, which only reinforces the negative thing because people are like, they're telling us to file our own police report or nothing's going to happen. No cops are coming. Well, why are they not coming? Because they don't have the cops to do it. Why don't they have the cops do it? Well, there's not the money to hire more people. Well, why is there not? Is it defund the police? Well, no, actually, Asheville's budget for the police went up last year, but it was reported as it was cut by $4 million. Why? Because it was $4 million less than what was proposed, but it was an increase from what it was. So media has a lot of manipulation that it does.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to state my position on this.
Yeah.
I love what Chief Zach has done. I love what he's done. And you're right. He was thrown right into an impossible situation with those riots happening the first summer on the job. And, what a tough thing for the city to go through. But being the new chief in that role in a city you really don't know anything about yet.
Right.
And your villain.
But he knew there were how many chiefs before him in a short period of time? That ought to tell you something.
You're villain number one for nothing you did wrong, and to have to face that. And
but I mean, I won't project anything onto you, but coming in and not knowing about the Asheville vibe and what I was talking about of Asheville has a PR thing that it tries to project. When he comes in and speaks so bluntly about different things, not aware or concerned about the cultural of motif that goes on.
You've been shaking trees for 30 years. I would think you would love that.
Well, like I said, now I did love when he went ahead and put the data out, when he released the report and hey, it's for me, when you're in a position of public office, present the information to support your statement. When you just make a statement and you don't provide something behind it, I think you set yourself up when you're in a public office. And so I loved when he said, here's the data report. Since I've been chief, here are how many cases have been, charged and dismissed. This is the percentage of public urination and defecation cases. This is the number of, panhandling and everything. I love that. It's the blanket kind of things that end up being fodder for the partisan and divisive forces within our dialogue. I don't like to see people in public office feed that, whether knowingly, whether willfully or not knowing that they're doing it. And, the lesson to me was, okay, I can't give that feedback anymore because the climate is so amped up that trying to speak unemotionally and productively toward a larger issue, there's just not the oxygen in the room for that right now. And that's unfortunate. So instead of doing it on the microphone, I do it one-on-one with individual people, and I work with different organizations to try and facilitate people working together, talking together in ways that are more possible to do under the umbrella of a business radio station than a political channel, And so that's kind of where I'm at, bringing it full circle is.
Was that time, the riots and all that, was that one of the most emotional things for you to report on? I can't remember anything that tense in this city ever.
I do. I remember the Tea Party movements. I remember the Let Asheville Vote movement thing. I remember, I remember what Joe Dunn and Carl Mumpower, and that whole thing, going back a little bit earlier in Asheville history than some people may remember, but you used to have political, philosophical diversity on city council. I don't know that we've had that for a while. I think you have economic priority differences. You have hoteliers and community activists, that people may say, oh, well, they're all liberal. Well, but okay, but that is such a broad thing. Let's talk about specific issues. Cost of housing in Asheville is unsustainable. Hotels are going up. Every time you turn around, there's digging of another foundation for another hotel. Who's going to work in all these freaking hotels? Who's going to work in the restaurants that all these people going to the hotels want to go to? There has to be some kind of conversation where we look at more than just, I can get this many permits in the city, and look, our city's grown by this, and our TDA has this much more money to advertise for more people to come here. 10 million visitors in a year is not enough. It's probably more than enough. When you have a metropolitan population of 490,000 and you get 10 million visitors, how do you sustain that with a year-round population? There's big issues. There's big issues and big challenges, but I don't think we solve them through the larger media conglomerate channels, and I don't think we fix it through our political systems anymore. I think we have to solve it through handshake diplomacy. I think we have to solve it through kitchen table conversations.
Yep. All right, couple of rapid fire conversations here before we go to our final break. Cannabis, legal or no, and why?
Absolutely legal. Absolutely. I've said right along, it's insane to me that people can be locked up in prison for smoking pot. I've said that from day one, even though I'm not a smoker. I know I probably look like one, but I've been accused of that. You look like you're a stoner. Well, okay. I don't know what that means, but absolutely should never be locking someone up for doing something. Now, if they go, here's the difference for me. If something you're doing ends up crossing the line where you violate someone else's right or their ability to travel safely, or that's where the boundary should be. It shouldn't be what you're doing on your own.
To yourself.
Right. It's when you all of a sudden violate someone else, that's when the conversation should take place. Whether it's a fifth, a JD, or if it's a joint. When you cross the line where you're endangering others or violating other people's rights or ability to move safely, that's when it should be an enforceable thing. But what you do, what you grow in your garden or smoke in your living room on a Friday night, I don't care. And no one in government should either.
Artificial intelligence.
Scary as hell. Scary as hell. Because I think there's a lot of situations where even people who have non-artificial intelligence look around at humanity some days and go, yeah, no, we don't deserve to stay here. So if artificial intelligence gets to a point of awareness and looks around
and says, "Fuck that guy,"
I think what we know has impacted the planet, and just real quick. I know you said rapid fire.
You're fine,
but if you believe that we were created by God and that we were put on this earth for a purpose. What is it? And for those out there, this is my Asheville sensitivity. Whatever you call God, you look through different major spiritual, philosophical, divine kind of teachings across world culture. There's similar themes through all of them, and that theme is that we are stewards, that we were created to take care of creation. And so if we take that approach toward things and our job is to take care of creation, has humanity lived up to that? How many extinctions have there been? Pollution, violence, war, all these different things. And again, it could go back to Cain and Abel. But if AI all of a sudden becomes aware and has capacities for things, and we're completely dependent on our economy, our supply lines, our very survival on technology, keeping us alive and producing our medicines and cleaning our air and our water, and all of a sudden something decides to shut that all off, Mama will take care of the rest. Mama Earth will go ahead and take care of the rest. And I think you saw that with COVID at the beginning when everything shut down. I don't know about you, but I noticed a difference in the skies.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Oh, man, the air was just, I was like, this is what it was like when I was a kid. After about 7 months of everything shut down, I was like, yeah, this is amazing. And then you start seeing reports of, things swimming up into the Venice canals that are clear and all these kind of things. It was wild to think how quickly Earth can rebalance itself. And if you see a house get abandoned, you see how quickly that house disappears into the landscape.
And how bad we are for this planet. That was a great example. I mean, we're screwing this up.
If we really lean into our purpose as stewards of creation, I've said it a few times, the phrase, create or restore, nurture, protect. I've said over and over again, take care of your own garden. If that's what we're supposed to do, and if that, all the busyness of life and chasing these different things and trying to acquire this, trying to influence that and everything, and it never feels right, and you're out of sync, and you're stressed out, and you have all this anxiety or depression and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you have your little circle, whether it's your home, a farm, a business, nonprofit, whatever it is, and you take care of that garden, and you're just creating or restoring, nurturing, and protecting, I feel pretty confident you're going to feel purpose in what you're doing. You're going to feel peace. You're going to feel balance and flow. And if you believe that we're created for that purpose, if we can get back to that, AI might say, you know what? Let's help them do this. They're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But as things stand right now, AI terrifies me because I don't know that humanity's ready for something to judge us.
Yeah. And the last rapid fire subject is border security, sir.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I got to tell you the truth. I go back and forth on it all the time. Because for me, the border is the outer atmosphere in some sense. We're all of the same tribe. And going back to what I just said, if we all realized that, and took more of that steward spirit toward what we touch in our lives, then things like borders become irrelevant. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that don't. And I go back to those two camps of humanity. There's a lot of people that are successfully oppressing the live and let live people. And I don't blame them for trying to escape to a place they feel like they can have that. But at the same time, so many of people coming in and overwhelming to where that garden becomes overwhelmed. If all of a sudden, a pack of wild boar show up on your farm's toast. And I'm not trying to compare migrants to that, but I'm saying as far as maybe the way for us to address border security is to try and address supporting more of that healthy steward, live and let live example, exporting that more. Yeah. I think the United States has become much more isolated and not as efficient at giving that example. There's a lot of attempts to control things and influence things, and so not that we don't have some things in history that have, not lived up to that. But the promise of how we were created as a nation was on the principles of that stewardship. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That is at the very core, the foundation of what our societal cornerstone is. And we haven't always lived up to it, but we've always evolved toward that. And so, the border issue is tough because in one sense, it's like, I wish idealistically we could get to a point where we realize that the outer level of the atmosphere is our border, and out beyond that great vastness. This is a very special garden we have as a very unique place in our corner of the universe, and at the same time, there's such horribleness going on in the world that it can overwhelm the sustainability of the places that it's not. And so, I don't have an answer to that one. Yeah.
All good. Well, I appreciate that. Good stuff. We got Matt Mittan. I'm Cory Short. This is Cosmic Koolaid, episode 12. We'll be back for our fourth segment right here in a minute.
Okay. Hey y'all, I'm Dunbar with Instant Karma Asheville. We are a one-stop hippie shop and a true Asheville experience. And we have 3D tapestries. You gotta check this out. See what I'm saying? Every 3D tapestry comes with a free pair of 3D glasses. It's amazing. We've got grassroots hats, belly dancing gear, and we have beautiful dream catchers for catching all those dreams that you don't want to have. We have locally made Asheville soap. It's delicious. You're gonna want some for you and your mom. Those would be incense matches. They're really great for the bathroom. Yeah. We have great pipes too. And we have yoga mats. They're really beautiful and soft, and they really help you to just calm down. We sell dragon eye journals and pendants. All sorts of beautifully made local stuff. We have 2 locations, one in West Asheville on Haywood Road, and the other one is downtown on North Lexington Avenue. Make sure you check out our online store at instantkarmaasheville.com. And I can say we are the place you want to be.
Welcome back to Cosmic Koolaid. I am Cory Short. In the booth with me today is Mr. Matt Mittan, a legendary friend, guy, father, husband, entrepreneur, and just all-around badass dude and a good friend for a long, long time. Big radio personality for almost 30 years in town and political conversationalist, we'll call it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. For a while
You're
there.
not really
anyway.
an activist per se, because you don't really stand on one side of the fence, but you just make sure everything comes to
Is
the
accountabilist a word? You know, instead of
I like
activist.
I like it.
You know, we'll make it up right now. I was an accountabilitist. You know, I wanted to see accountability. I didn't care what the letter was.
So, does your son want to do the same stuff you do?
Well, he's in the family business. My oldest son is. He's grown up around it. Aaron has, since the time he was a little toddler, going to station events and, grabbing little things here and there at, 3 years old and stuff. And he turns 29 in a couple weeks here, and he's currently the production manager for Biz Radio. It's funny. He would say the same thing if he's sitting here with you. The first couple of times he tried working for me in my business, it didn't go great, and I think that happens with family. And, he went off in the Army for 9 years, served in Afghanistan, got into some dicey stuff over there, and he's now a dad. He's made me a grandpa and everything. And I think all that life experience and his growth and maturity and his life circumstance, he now feels very comfortable and okay with getting into the family business, and he's really good at it, really, really good at it. I tell people I'd hire him to be my production manager even if he wasn't my son. He's really good. And so it's a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed being able to work together and communicate more and more as peers in a work environment, which makes it even more fun, for the father-son component of it, because we have this shared thing that we have a really good balance and we have good systems in place, a great team that he's a part of, and
What about Andrew? Is he going to do this eventually?
No, I he'd probably be like, I don't even say my name on stuff. He's 17, and he's, knock on wood, on track to graduate a little bit early, hopefully. And I'm not sure what he's going to do. He just started playing bass, so maybe he'll be a rocker. That's in the family line as well.
Sure.
So, whatever he wants to be. And Zoe, too, Michelle's daughter, my stepdaughter. Zoe, she's very much in the family business because, Michelle is, too. Michelle's in broadcasting and comedy production and everything. And Zoe has a show she does on Asheville FM Sunday mornings, and she's 16. And she also she has a lot of online platform stuff like Instagram, TikTok stuff, and thousands of followers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Neat.
So yeah, it's the family business. We'll see what Andrew decides to do. I'm not sure. He's still kind of in the not my spotlight kind of mode.
So we've been friends for a long time. So you and I have talked about this, but I don't know how much you've discussed it on air with your audience over the years, but you were in fact adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that journey. Tell our audience about that journey.
Yeah, so I knew from before my earliest memories that I was adopted. I said earlier in our conversation, I'm from a very adoption-heavy family. There's a culture of adoption that existed within my entire family growing up. So, adoption's a very different story for a lot of different people. For me, it was one that was always right out front, and everyone, knew about adoption, and it wasn't an issue. It's just like,
Yeah.
I don't look as much like my grandparents as as some of my cousins do, but what was funny is I look a lot like my mom and dad, that raised me, and rest in peace for both of them. My mom just passed away this past summer, and my dad several years ago. But being adopted, for me, my journey, I can only speak to my story. I never had to wonder if I was wanted. I always was made to feel very special, very intentional addition to the family. That my parents had to go out of their way and make the effort to make it happen for me to be able to be adopted. And, so I grew up with that shroud of love covering me. And my mom, in her personality, is one of a cheerleader. I could do no wrong in my mom's eyes. And any crazy idea or dream that I expressed, she was always like, of course you can do that. You can do that great. So doing a syndicated TV show at 16, of course, why wouldn't you, going on even like during the Take a Stand days and helping to contribute to the, disbarring of the state governor and locking up the Speaker of the House for 5 years in federal prison and all the things we accomplished, for accountability. Never was a second thought, But on the flip side of that, there was no one in my family that I could look to that was like I was nature-wise. Nurture-wise, great fit. But nature-wise, music, as an example, can play anything I pick up pretty much. Yeah. Very quickly get it. I got an ear for music. I can play stuff. I have an encyclopedic brain about music. I'm a walking jukebox of encyclopedic stuff about music.
Other stuff too, not just
other stuff too, but music's a huge part of my life as much as breathing is. It's not been, until just recently, it's not really been a public front of my personality. It's starting to come out that way more now. But it's always been a huge part of my balance as a human being. No one in my family is musical. Nobody. I mean, love my parents, but in church on Sunday morning, they get singing. It was painful because I can hear pitch and tone and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, I felt like the whole congregation would be looking over going, who lit the seal in the house? And so, there were elements where I never had a longing, like a missing piece of myself. But at the same time, there were certain aspects of myself. I was always a very outward personality. I was very, I say I started in media when I was, 15, 16 years old. Actually, even earlier than that, there's videos and pictures on old 8mm film of me getting in costume and entertaining the whole family in the center of the living room. I've always been an entertainer personality type, producing and putting on shows in my neighborhood at 10 years old with little light shows and taking my sister's Smurf and Strawberry Shortcake figurines and doing a whole little set and pretending to do a stage show with them and a soundtrack and lights and charging people a dime to come in. I was doing that at 10 years old. So it's always been a part of me. No one in my family that I grew up, not extended cousins, aunts, nobody ever came close to touching any of that kind of activity. So that was something that I didn't really have any mentors or guidance, from a nature side on that. And so fast forward, one of the things about being adopted is not knowing your medical history, not knowing your biological story. And my then wife at the time of 21 years, we had had a number of failed pregnancies, and some of them very difficult. And then, and you're right, I don't talk about this much, but we lost a son soon after he was born, and it was from the same heart developmental issues that had also led to some of the failed late pregnancies, so that was really hard. And before I could move forward on deciding whether we were going to try again after the loss of Joshua, it was like, I can't move forward on family expansion or even how to plan for my kids growing up and them eventually maybe starting a family until I know some medical background. And so I sought out my biological history. I sought out my biological parents, and that's a hard thing to do. Records are protected and everything. And so being from Boston, being born in Boston, we put flags on like Google alerts. Anytime there were any cases or news stories or anything about adoption in Massachusetts, we'd get an alert on it. I also went ahead and registered on a bunch of reconnecting websites where you put put some general information, and it's confidential, but if there's any other people that put their information in that matches from the other side of the coin, then there was like a neutral middle ground mediator that could see if it was a match, where both parties were seeking things out. And none of that had come to any fruition. And then all of a sudden got an alert saying that there was a court case in Massachusetts that anyone born between 1968 and the Privacy Act of 1974, they could petition for their original birth records. There was some little gap in the law in Massachusetts, and I fell into that. I was born in December of 1970. And so, got the little application thing, sent it off with the $20 to the clerk of the state or whatever. About 6 weeks later, got an envelope in the mail from the state, and I knew that my original birth certificate was in it. It took me 3 months to open that envelope. I mean, for 3 months, I just stared at that envelope. Every day I'd look at it and go, I don't want to open it.
Not yet.
Not yet, because think about that for a second. The Pandora's box you could be opening.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hurt anyone. Is it going to cause insecurity with my parents, with my sister, with my cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents? What's it going to do in my birth parents' lives? I don't know if they're still alive. I don't know if people know that there was a kid. I don't know the circumstances of it. I don't want to disrupt their lives and everything. But I finally decided to open it up, and within seconds, getting on Google, had the contact number for my birth mother. Within seconds, because I had the birth name, original hometown, date of birth, all that kind of stuff. Boom, had the address and phone number in a matter of seconds.
Oh, man.
And it took me another few months to make a phone call. I was like, what the hell do I say? What do you say? Hey, remember giving me up in 1970? And so I didn't know what to say. And so I finally, a few months later, so we're now 6 months past when I got the envelope. And I call and I'm like, hey, this is Matt. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. Just give me a call back. My number's blah, blah, blah. And I left it at that, and I didn't, because I didn't know who's hearing the messages. I didn't know what the circumstance was. No answer, no callbacks, nothing. So after a couple months of calling every couple of weeks, I knew by the birth certificate that her birthday was the next day. And I was like, I got to leave something more specific. I would never call this back. Is it a scam? Is a collector of some sort. And so I called back and I was like, hey, this is Matt, I live in Asheville. I've called a few times. If I have the right place, and I think I do, then tomorrow's, Phyllis's birthday. And you wouldn't have known me as Matt. You would have known me as Eric in Boston in 1970. If I have the right place, know that everything's cool. I just have a few questions. No big deal. Just call me back. If I don't have the right place and this doesn't make any sense, please call me back and let me know.
Wow.
And I walked into the Oteen post office to check my box. As I'm walking back out, the phone rings, and it was Pennsylvania area code, the number I just called. Whew. I got to tell you, man, you want to talk about panic moments? I didn't know if I'm going to get chewed out. I didn't know if I'm going to be embraced. I didn't know if I'm going to be told this person's passed away. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I answered it. And she goes, hi, this is Phyllis. And I said, oh, thanks, Phyllis, for calling me back. And I didn't know what to say. I'm fumbling through, and I'm like, so I don't know if I am calling the right person or not. I think you are. And I was like, okay, well, so, you would have known me in 19. Yes, I did. And everything. And I'm like, so she said, I am, and I've been looking for you for years. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, it was just like instantly there was just this like, oh my God. And she got really emotional. And when we compared notes, she started looking for me almost instantaneously to the month without me sharing it when I started looking for her. It was almost like that nature thing that even though she hadn't raised me, there was a mother thing that knew something had happened, when Joshua passed, and I decided to do that. And so she had been searching for me, and I sat in the front seat of the family minivan talking on the phone with her until my phone was about dead. And I'm like, I got to get home. The family's probably wondering where I'm at and everything. I said, I'll call you when I get home, and we just started a process of, we got into a thing where every day we were talking on the phone, getting to know each other. And we got to where we'd take turns. Like, okay, tonight's my night. I get to ask questions. Tomorrow night, she's going to ask me questions. And we were just talking, and nothing else was coming up other than just getting to know each other, and sharing the stories and catching up on life stuff. And I never got into asking about, why was I given up for adoption or anything? Because her reaction just blew me away so much. And there was such open energy of curiosity that it became a get to know this person that you have a shared history and DNA with, but you don't know.
Did you ever feel animosity creeping up in you? Like,
no.
Where you felt like you wanted to ask your mom, how could you do this?
No, not at all, because I had
good.
I had such a beautiful, amazing family. And she was just so like, I'm so glad to be able to talk to you. Tell me about your life, and everything. And it was a beautiful thing. And so it got to a point, it was, I don't know how many weeks into it. And I was like, all right, it's my turn. I'm like, all right, is there any musical talent in the family? And I shared, well, like what I shared with you. And she goes, oh, sweetie, don't you know who your father is? And I'm like, well, no, it's blank on the birth certificate. And then she's like, well, that's interesting. Basically it wasn't blank at the time, and I was, you do that dog with a new sound, like, wait, what? And she started laughing. She said, well, yeah, I played a little bass. I was in some punk bands in the 70s and, up in New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, everything. But yeah, you didn't get that from me. You got it from your father. I was like, oh, well, cool. Who is he? And she's like, are you sure you want to know? I'm like, what do you mean? Am I sure? Yeah, I'm curious, And she goes, well, it's kind of a big deal. You sure you can handle it? I'm like, I am on the phone with my biological mother that I've been talking to every day for the last however many weeks. You're worried if it might be too much? This is crazy. I mean, we're getting to know each other. And so she told me, oh, your father's Doug Engel. And I was like, okay, doesn't mean anything. And she said, Iron Butterfly, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. You've heard of it? And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And she said, well, he's the founder of the band, the writer, organist, singer, and everything. That's who your father is. And in that moment, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because being a music encyclopedia, I knew the story of Iron Butterfly. I knew the story of, their meteoric rise and being the first platinum recording artist, not the Beatles, not Elvis, not Rolling Stones, it was Iron Butterfly. And, and I knew the whole story of them and bringing Led Zeppelin to the United States. Led Zeppelin, the only band they ever opened for was Iron Butterfly on that first tour in the United States. And so I knew all that. And instead of being like, oh, that's cool, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because I had never known where that nature came from in me. And so then began a process of like, well, now I have to go through the whole thing about reaching out to him. And what do I say? It was a totally different thing because, like, I don't want him to think I'm after anything or, I want to, because he was famous or successful or anything. It wasn't about any of that. I didn't care. I was just still trying to find out medical history, but I had also just had this really great dynamic with my biological mother. So, of course, I was curious about my biological father. And that's when I get into the story of learning how I came to be and him. They were getting ready to go on a European tour and arranging for a couple of dates to play at the Garden in Boston so that he could meet with her and they could talk about stuff and make arrangements for an apartment and paying for medical bills and all this really sweet stuff. But yeah, there's a whole... Michelle's like, you got to write it down in a book because the story and like the conspiracy stuff with Atlantic Records and how they tried to cover up my birth and lied to him that I wasn't actually his. And then he ended up walking away from Iron Butterfly at the height of their success because the music industry, he felt corrupted his soul to where he didn't recognize, looking at how he, being the son of a preacher, and she was also the son of a preacher, they both connected in that way.
Did you get to connect with him too?
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
It's it's great, and I can't tell the story of where I am in my life now without the impact of connecting with them, because at the height of all my stuff that was going on with Take a Stand, I was doing a lot of national stuff, and I was kind of being groomed for a national stage show, and there was talk about maybe taking over Dr. Laura Schlesinger's slot for Clear Channel nationally, which is now Glenn Beck, that I may be that person, that in that slot that Glenn Beck does now. And, life got crazy. And after the death of my son, I kind of lost my way for a bit, and it kind of like, I didn't care anymore. It was like, what's the point? I try to do things right and I try to be good by people and be honorable and resist all these different temptations. And this is what happens. Screw it. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to live the life that I always tried to not live. And there were consequences of that, including divorce and bankruptcy. And, but it was funny because I walked away, the bankruptcy and everything else happened in the wake of me walking away from all of it. And I walked away from all of it because of getting to know my biological father and sharing his story and the trappings of that kind of scale that I was on a trajectory to reach. I was already seeing the same mistakes and the same consequences that he had experienced in his life. I was already starting to see in mine, and I hadn't even reached that pinnacle yet. And so I made the decision to walk away from it and take a different path. And that's when, stuff hit the fan. There were a lot of people that were making a lot of money off of me. Yeah. And me walking away from it did not land well at all. And it led to a chain of events and sweeping things and, different problems that were in my marriage. Even though it was a long-term marriage, those problems exasperated, became more and more apparent. And, stuff comes home to roost. And it did. And it led to divorce, And so, but in the wake of all that, I remember talking with my father. I always say my mom and my dad are the ones who raised me. My mother and my father are the ones who brought me into this world. That's how I differentiate when I'm talking to family or friends. I say my mom and my dad, my mother and my father. And I was talking to my father, and I was like, man, I've lost everything. I just don't know what to do. And he's like, nah, you're looking at it all wrong. And I'm like, no, dude, I don't think I am. I don't think I'm looking at it wrong at all. And he's like, everything's been washed away. The only things that are left around you right now are the things that really matter. He's like, you've got your cornerstones of what you're going to build going forward, and you don't have to question it. The people that are in your life now love you for you, and you don't have to question loyalty. You don't have to question if they have different selfish ambitions to be in your circle, because there's nothing for them to gain other than that they love you and they want to be there with you. And I was like, holy crap, he's right. And I've rebuilt a life since that time around those principles and with the people that, have the love and the care unconditionally for me. And that helps me be a better steward of taking care of my garden, you know, my family, my business, my community. And as over the last several years, the visibility of community and radio hasn't been as present for me because taking care of my home garden, you know, my family has taken up more of that energy as there's been health challenges and things like that. And so that is the first most responsibility as a creation to take care of creation right here at the home garden first. And I wouldn't have had those priorities or that clarity or the confidence to stay the course on that path if I had not connected with my biological parents, who my adoptive parents were very supportive of. As a matter of fact, before my dad passed, he was so glad that I had built a relationship with my father. He was just, it meant so much to him because he knew he was ill and he knew he was, you know, his days were numbered. Yeah. And he told me flat out, he was so glad and grateful that I had made that connection with my biological father, and that he was able to, because he had been a very high profile public person, because he had dealt with corporate media type stuff, he and I, kind of like a couple of old war vets, I never reached the level he did, obviously, but the interactions and the temptations and the trappings were the same. Yeah. And he could speak to me in a way that no one else in my life could. You know, like I was saying earlier, there was no one in my life that could relate to the things that I instinctually was doing media-wise or public-wise or performer-wise. And so I think I have that perspective now of like the whole nature-nurture thing. We have our nature that's within us, and nurture is trying to steer you away from the trappings that are potentially damaging and support the things that could be positive, but the nurture doesn't have to come from the nature. Because my parents that raised me did an amazing job with the nurture, and it protected my nature, you know, kept me away from the things that were trappings up until they didn't, and that was my own decision. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I've tried to impart some of those lessons and those perspectives to my own kids, and now that I'm a grandfather, you know, it's an exciting thing because growing up, I didn't have people that looked like me. Now there's even more people in the world that look exactly like me, you know, in both directions generationally. I've got people up the tree. I look exactly like my father. You pull up pictures of me and my father, put them side by side, age comparison, you can't tell us apart other than the threads. You know, it's amazing. And you'd say the same thing about my boys.
We're going to put that on screen in the edit. You're going to have to send me those pictures.
Yeah. It's pretty stunning. And you know, and it's a beautiful thing. And now that, you know, both my mom and my dad have passed, and the relationship I have with all my cousins and aunts and uncles and everything is a beautiful thing. But I also have a whole extended family. I've got siblings that are biological, nieces and nephews. And, you know, my mother and my father are both still alive, and I have relationships with them. And you know, not all adoption stories end out that way, but mine did. And I do not take it for granted.
That's wonderful, man. Thank you for sharing. We're just about out of time here. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about anything that you want, any questions that you wished I would have asked you, that you want my audience to know about Matt Mittan.
I want people to know that we can't do things on our own. We can't do them by ourselves. And that along the way, you have a chance to interact with different people that may be there to be a champion for you, or a medic, or, you know, an encouragement, maybe an accountability, maybe a tough love mirror that you need. But also you have the opportunity, and we have the obligation to be that to others, you know. And my mom had said something to me at one time when I was going through a challenging time, and she was like, don't you dare rob other people of the opportunity to be a blessing to you. Don't be selfish. Don't take that away from them. And then when she was sick and on hospice, I got to tell her the same thing. She didn't want to be a burden to anybody. She didn't want to trouble people. I'm like, don't you dare rob people. You know, I used her own words back against her. But for me in my life over the last 8 years or so, Michelle has been that for me, you know, and vice versa, you know. And so we were friends, Michelle Sheave. She and I, we were friends and collaborators for many, many, many years before we became a couple. And so being friends and collaborators and then a couple, that bubble is something that we're very protective of. We're very aware of, but I don't think either of us would exist in the way we do without each other, and then reminding each other at times when needed to allow that larger bubble of community to support, and you did that as well. You held a fundraiser for her when she needed the organ transplant, and so whether it's allowing people to help you, don't rob them of that blessing of being of service to you, but being open and not bashful if there's an idea you have that you can help, and you're great at this. You do this all the time, of helping where there's need that you see around you. And it gets back to, what we've talked about a couple of times in closing. There's two basic categories of humanity in existence today on this planet that I believe. There's those that are the empathetic, live and let live, but also take care of your own garden, your circle expands out to your community from there, and others that are seeking to impact or control or influence other people's stuff. By being open to helping others and also allowing others to help you, you fuel this part of humanity that gets back to our purpose of creation, of being stewards of creation. And so, in closing, I want to encourage that, and then also acknowledge, Michelle she's my rock, and I've been taking care of her a lot with her medical challenges too, but she takes care of me as much as anything else. And I think, I just want to acknowledge that and put it out there, and then it goes out from there.
And shout out to Michelle. She's been battling some serious health stuff like a true warrior. And I know you've been right there on the front lines with her, and she's a sweet lady, and I'm glad that you two have each other.
Yeah, she's a fighter. Anytime I get whining about something, I just remember, Michelle's been through so much more. She's still a positive warrior for service to her community, and that's a great inspiration.
She runs the, is it Slice of Life?
Slice of Life Comedy, yeah.
Yeah, and so all the local comedy talent runs through Michelle around here. So Michelle Sheave, check her out on Facebook and her website.
Yeah, so you can go to sliceoflifecomedy.com for that aspect. But then she does other stuff too, like I do. We have our garden. Mm-hmm. We have our companion plants in the garden. Yep. It's kind of how Asheville existence is, and for other people in other regions too. Sure. But thank you, for what you're doing and continuing to look for avenues to fulfill that gravity you feel in you. And this is where I'm switching over to the mentor thing. Of the guy that's known you since you were a teenager, is that, your heart and your spirit are pure for seeking a way to impact positively. And I think at times, even to your own detriment or sacrifice, because you output the service more than you bring it in. But it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so proud and grateful that over all these years, you've continued to look for those ways and those avenues to be that steward for the skills you've been given. And so, proud of you. And I'm glad to know
I appreciate you welcoming me so warmly into that creative space, because you did. I mean, we did that. It started as a fun conversation at Laser Storm about, hey, I'd love to talk on the radio once. Let's try it, and I don't think I was ever meant to really be on the radio, but I think I'm enjoying this. And the different creative outlets that led to this, and you made that happen. That was you. So well, I'm very, very thankful to you.
Just keep being you, and the ripple effect and the wake you leave behind your boat of life continues to reach new shores, and that's a beautiful thing.
And the same to you, sir.
Thank you.
Tell your family I said hello, and we love them. Well, they'll probably see this, but I love you guys, all you Mittan people and Michelle. So thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. We'll do it again in the future. This is Matt Mittan. I'm Cory Short, episode 12, Cosmic Koolaid. We'll see you next time.